You've seen it happen, right? A horrific case of sexual violence hits the news, and suddenly everyone's asking questions. But here's the thing. Are they the right questions?
Almost immediately, you hear it. Why was she out so late? It's a question that just hangs there, and you can already feel the blame starting to shift, can't you? Right onto the victim.
And then, right on cue, comes the next one. Why was she alone? As if being by yourself is somehow asking for trouble, a mistake that made her a target.
And of course, there's this one. Why didn't she fight back? This question completely misses the reality of what happens in these moments. The fear, the trauma, the pure survival instinct that kicks in.
Okay, so here's the real problem. All of these questions, they're pointing in the completely wrong direction. They let us avoid talking about the one person who is actually responsible, the perpetrator. If we ever want to find real solutions, we have to start asking questions about the real causes.
So let's do that. Let's get to the real causes. But first, we've got to cut through all the myths and misconceptions that cloud this issue. It's time to look at what the research and the data actually tell us.
All right, check this out. If you just look at the official stats, you might see something that seems odd. Per capita, the reported rate of rape in a country like India often looks lower than in many Western nations. But that one statistic? Oh, it's hiding a way more complicated story.
So that really makes you wonder, right? Does a low number actually mean low crime? Or is there something else going on here? The answer to that is absolutely key.
While the reality is, what we're looking at is a massive crisis of underreporting. Think about it. Deep social stigma, the fear of what your own family will say, a total lack of faith in the police or the courts. It all means most cases never, ever get reported. And here's the crucial takeaway. A country with a higher number of reported cases might not have more crime. It might just have a system where victims actually feel safe enough to come forward.
Okay, let's bust another huge myth while we're at it. You know the whole stranger lurking in a dark alley idea? The research from all over the world is crystal clear on this. That's not how it usually happens. The vast majority of the time, the perpetrator is someone the victim knows, a family member, a so-called friend, a neighbor, a coworker.
So you have to wonder, what is going on inside the perpetrator's head? Well, when researchers interview convicted offenders, a really disturbing pattern shows up again and again. They almost never see themselves as the bad guy. Instead, it's always the victim's fault, what she was wearing, how she was acting, or just for being where she was.
Now, this isn't just them making up excuses after the fact. It's actually a known psychological pattern. It's called cognitive distortion. It's basically a mental trick people use to justify their own horrible actions. They literally twist reality in their own minds so they don't have to feel guilty or take any responsibility.
And this gets us to the absolute core of it all, the motivation. There's this myth that sexual violence is about some uncontrollable sexual desire, right? But the research just completely blows that idea out of the water. I mean, if it were really about desire, why are children or elderly women so often the victims? No, the evidence is overwhelming. Sexual violence isn't really about sex. It's about power. It's about domination and control.
Okay, so if it's about control, where does that need for control even come from? It doesn't just pop up out of nowhere, right? It's actually fed and supported by a much bigger social system.
And researchers have a name for that system: patriarchy. Now that's a big word, but what it boils down to is a social structure where the idea of controlling women is just seen as, well, normal. It's a system where a woman's autonomy, her basic freedom to choose for herself, is limited.
And this isn't some abstract theory, you know. You see it in very real everyday stuff. Telling women what they can and can't wear, limiting where they can go and when, shrugging off domestic violence as just a family issue. All these things are part of a culture that makes controlling women seem okay.
So here's the point we really need to get. In this kind of system, sexual violence isn't a bug, it's a feature. It is the most extreme, the most violent tool there is to enforce that control, to put someone in their place, and to punish anyone who dares to step out of line.
Look, understanding this root cause is everything. Because once you get it, it completely changes how you think about finding a solution. You stop just reacting and start thinking about real, long-term prevention.
We've all seen it. After a horrible case, people are angry. They want justice. And so you hear these loud calls for the absolute harshest punishments possible. And that reaction is totally understandable. But here's the tough truth. The research is pretty clear that just making punishments harsher doesn't actually solve the problem.
So why doesn't it work?
Well, there are a couple of big reasons. First, super harsh punishments can actually make victims less likely to report, especially if the abuser is a relative. But even more important is this. Study after study shows that what really stops criminals isn't how bad the punishment is, it's how certain they are that they're gonna get caught.
So if that's not the answer, what is? What's the real path to change? All the evidence points to one word: prevention. That means education about gender and respect, starting really young. It means making sure everyone understands what consent actually is. And yeah, it means fixing our justice system so there's real accountability, so that certainty of getting caught isn't just a theory, it's a reality.
So in the end, this was never really about what someone was wearing, or where they were, or what time it was. It's about the ideas and beliefs that we as a society let slide. Beliefs that normalize control and make excuses for violence. And that brings us right back to the beginning. Real, lasting change. Well, that can only happen when we all stop asking the wrong questions and finally start demanding the real answers.